So had it with Republicans saying that everyone's taxes are going up? What if I told you some Democrats are now saying the same exact thing? There's a group led by former Clintonite and Obama advisor John Podesta recommending a big tax hike as a panel meeting at the White House recommends overhauling the entire tax code. You can count Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute, very worried about all of this. Chris, you've been connecting all the dots. What do you make of it?
Well, thanks for having me, Neil. I'm a little dubious of the administration's tax reform panel that they've got in meetings, which is supposed to, and they're supposed to produce a report by December. There's some good members on this panel, like Harvard's Martin Feldstein. However, I think this is kind of a treasure hunt to raise taxes on middle-class Americans, and it doesn't have the hallmarks of successful tax reforms. Back in 1986, Ronald Reagan came together with Democrats in Congress and he said, look, we'll close loopholes if we use the money to lower tax rates. That was a successful reform. This time around, the Obama administration seems hell-bent on raising taxes. So,
well,
I don't think
you don't know that, right? I mean, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt on this one, because when politicians say they're looking at the tax code, I think you're right. That's a buzzword for tax hikes. What if it might be inviting, a whole new way to look at either a flat tax, simplified tax, and this is really about that?
I don't think that they're going to go that far. I mean, there's some internal contradictions here. One is that the task force is supposed to come up with ideas to simplify the tax code. The Obama administration, many of its policies would make the tax code more complicated. Obama has proposed all kinds of new tax credits. He's proposed complicated new rules on multinational companies. I think if the task force recommended simplification, I don't think the administration would go along with it. The other internal contradiction is that the Peter Orszag, the budget director, says that they're going after the $300 billion tax gap. That's the money that Americans owe but is not being paid. But most of that money is middle-class money. It's small businesses, it's taxi drivers, it's waitresses, people like that who are in the middle class. So I think if they go after closing this tax gap, it's going to be a big tax hike on the middle class, and they've promised not to do that.
Well, I also think that this love affair we now have with Europe, we want to copy everything the Europeans do. They do have this value-added tax, essentially a super sales tax, a federal sales tax. And the one thing that has been echoed again and again from people in the White House, and at least my high sources there, including, as I say, the gardener and the chef, is that that's where the money is. That's where you can get a lot of money. But they wouldn't swap out income for that. They would just add it to that. What do you make of that?
Well, that's right. The politics here are interesting. For years, conservatives and small government libertarians have been saying, let's scrap the income tax and put in a consumption tax in place. Unfortunately, I think if a consumption tax like a VAT starts moving through Congress now, it'll end up being an add-on. And I think that's the last thing we need in this country, is for all Americans to pay like a new national sales tax or VAT, and businesses to have to file not only corporate tax returns, but also VAT tax returns.
But Chris, you just said something, like everything you say is so profound, but this one is real. I think people seriously must hear again, that if we are looking at a value-added tax or something similar, we're not swapping something out. We are adding to, which, by the way, is the predominant theme in Europe. People forget that it's not either or in a lot of these European countries, it's both. So we would be juicing the tax system, presumably, with both if they go through with what Europe does, right?
It's astounding. You know what the average VAT tax rate in Europe is? It's 20%. It's amazing. Every time consumers go to retail stores all across Europe, they pay on average a 20% hidden tax on the purchase of everything they buy. Cars, TV sets, the whole bit. So, while say Democrats here might favor introducing a low-rate VAT at, say, 5%, that doesn't sound like a very big burden. But, I think for sure, would grow over time, and I think that's the real danger here.
All right. Well, they're realizing the cost of all this stuff is adding up. You got to pay for it. So here we go. Chris, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.